Om Pramadana na sandeha kim karishami vrittiman. Udpadyante vilyante buddhischa yata jale. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. Ignorance is not real. Therefore, how can it cause any real doubt? Then what should the Jivan Mukta do with this mind and its projections? He allows them to rise spontaneously, then dissolves them all back like bubbles into water. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravilapayan San Matramanandaganam Vibhavayam Samhita San Bahir Antaram Va Kalam Nyayetaha Satakarmi Bande. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Brahman is an indeterminable mass of pure conscious awareness. Therefore, the Jivan Mukta takes what is external and what is internal and renders them into one indivisible state. Then he passes his time contentedly, meditates upon that state, and lives freely. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So welcome everyone here to the SRV Association Center on the big island of Hawaii. We are in Waimea, right in the center of the island, and surrounded by thousands and thousands of miles of water. So we feel very fortunate to be in the midst of that pure liquid element, which gives this Hawaiian Islands its feeling of sanctity and freshness. And so it's a perfect place to teach such pure systems as Vedanta, Yoga, Samkhya, Tantra, Buddhism, Jainism, and other great darshanas, paths of clear seeing that come from India. India being that one mother of all religions who has not just one divine being or savior or just one holy book, but dozens and hundreds of both. And they know because of the cycling of time that these come back and return all the time. In fact, they have that idea about samsara and nirvana rather than sin and grace, redemption. For us, it's samsara and nirvana, brought out more currently by the Buddhists, of course. But if you think in that way, then you think about just forgetfulness and remembrance, basically, not any eternal damnation or so forth. I'm speaking this way because the Jehovah's Witnesses came to my door this afternoon before I came to class and were telling me about their ideation, that is their religion, and the version of Christianity they pertain to. So thought about the vast differences between Far East and Middle East, and then Middle East and Near East, and then Near East and the West, and how religion has come from those shores, true religion, and it has always been taught. Non-duality particularly was at the foundation of it. That is, I and my Father are one that Christ spoke is there as the hub and substratum of Indian thinking, always has been. Even when it appears there are two or many, that is dualism and many gods and goddesses in their pantheon, still nonetheless they will always say, but there's only one indivisible reality behind all of these beings. So with that as their premise, they proceed to teach these systems that apply to us at different levels of our understanding. And so the religions of the world need to take care of one another like that. Brother and sister religions. And bring under wing those who are still laboring under misfiances like eternal damnation and creation theory and evolution without involution, other untenable systems that are being proposed in this day and age, which is a dark day and age. Not only dark with violence, but it's dark with Bhranti Darshana. And you remember last week, the class, we took a third of these Swami Aseshanandaji charts. I made 10 of them. And so the series, this is the third class, if I'm right, called Jivan Mukta, Advaita Vedanta in a Jivan Mukta. Jivan Mukta is a living liberated soul. Jivan, embodied, Mukta, or Mukti, liberated. So that's an ancient principle in India, that there are beings that can come into the body without losing memory or realization of their true nature. And these are the great souls which have come by the hundreds out of Mother India, and who she's gifted to other countries like Tibet and China and Japan finally. This long age or yuga of wisdom transmission that has come and is still coming has arrived at our shores most recently as Swami Vivekananda in 1893, who brought these teachings which I will share with you today and which I received from my guru, Swami Aseshanandaji. Here he is sitting in meditation near the ocean on the beach in Oregon at night, and having these great thoughts come up in his mind, you see, as he comes out of meditation. Because when you go into meditation, if you're a Jivan Mukta, then you probably don't think thoughts. You tend to go beyond them and just enter into a state of non-duality, which is bliss and peace that passes all understanding, and non-dual wisdom, highest intelligence. Pragyaparam, Buddha called it, supreme intelligence. That's beyond thought. But then when a person who's beyond thought comes back into the mind mechanism, we call it the psychophysical being or body-mind mechanism in Vedanta, then these great thoughts immediately come with him or her. And that's one of the benefits for keeping yourself high-minded. Is you need peace first and foremost, Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi said. So if you tend to dwell in peace all the time, then your mind will court this loka, this akasha, this space of intelligence that is shut off to most other beings who aren't entertaining it, you see, aren't even thinking about it, or we would call it dharma. You're not entertaining the dharma yet. Maybe you just have a little bit of moral and ethical religion in you, and you're a good boy or a bad boy, as the case may be. Good when you're thinking about your place in heaven and in church, but bad when you go to other countries and take your religion and foist it on others via violence. But he used to say, you pray to God, but you keep the powder keg dry. See? So you don't really believe in God, you believe in force and might. But the sign of a truly spiritual being is ahimsa, non-violence. They won't commit violence to anyone. And at the very most, violence would be the last resort. And that would be non-violent non-resistance, or violent non-resistance, even you could call it that. You would stand up for yourself. But if you were a renunciate and you knew the world to be unreal, then you probably wouldn't even stand up for yourself. And you just allow yourself to be struck down right on the spot. Or you would leave the place where violence was happening and live to sow peace another day. Others live to fight another day, but you would live to sow peace another day. So this is always on the mind of a high-minded thinker. See, that they'll come back into the mind, and when they visited the non-dual lokas or realm or atmosphere, call it akasha in Sanskrit, and they come out of that, then they'll bring these thoughts with them. It's just sort of like if you go and make friend with in a pen of dogs and puppies, you make friends with them and you walk out, they'll come with you. You see, they'll try and come with you and follow you. Same with your mind going into this highest state, and you come out and all these thoughts will come tagging along with you, and you'll want to then share them with others, which is what Swami Aseshanandaji Maharaj did for 40 or 50 years here in the West as a monk and as a Swami of the Ramakrishna order. And I was fortunate enough to have met him in my 20s and started learning from him right away and listening to his great sermons, as he would, or discourses would be a better word, and taking away many gems from that and pondering them in my own spiritual life and letting them settle over time. And that's called a transmission or a wisdom transmission. The father of yoga said that a great soul will make sons and daughters of people around him. He doesn't have to have blood-born children, but will have mind-born children, he says. So you'll influence one mind, will influence another mind, and that mind will take up the teachings and begin to spread them. And that's how it's always been in religion. One will teach 12, and each of those 12 will go out and teach another 12. And it'll be an underground river like that at first, and start its spread. And hopefully, the longer you can keep that spread pure, that is, if you understand the teachings of your guru properly, then you can keep the teachings pure, and you feel confident that you can pass them on to others without any germs or viruses in them, as it were. Being absolutely faithful to the word, the Dharma, and expanding your mind so that you can understand Brahman. Brahman doesn't expand, but the mind can expand to understand Brahman. So that's what's required of you. And if you take on discipleship of a great soul like that. So I created 10 of these charts in reverence and respect and memory of my teacher, and we went through 3 of them. So we had touched on this one when we ended last week's class, and this week's class again will be another 3 hours of dipping our minds like a towel into the lake of Dharma. So it just becomes saturated. Don't fret or worry too much if you don't take it all in all at once, because it's a transmission comes in streams, wisdom streams, and the mind isn't yet acclimatized yet to take it all in. It needs to take it in like a sponge, and then you go and squeeze it out later, and the sponge retains that moisture which is best suited to it, and the other can be put off till later, or maybe there are things that you already know, because all the Dharma is really known to all souls, but many have forgotten it or have distanced themselves from it. So coming close into the Dharma is like a cold man in the Arctic coming close to a fire, and that's how you get rid of the numbness of ignorance. That's why I chanted at the beginning of class, Pramadana sandeha kim karishyami vrittiman. We want to make sure that this ignorance, we know that, like Sri Ramakrishna said, ignorance is like darkness in a cave. You bring in a torch and it goes away right away. So the darkness may collect, but it's something that you can simply introduce the light to, and it goes away as if it were never real. So that word avidya is, according to both Swami Vivekananda and Swami Aseshanandaji, was the only sin. If there were a sin, the word sin in Sanskrit in India, which there's not, probably the closest is kilbisa. And Sri Krishna uses that word in the Gita. But if there were any sin, ignorance or weakness would be it. So those are the two things that you watch and guard against. You strengthen yourself, and that's why I wanted to start off with some wonderful teachings on this new chart. I think I've been thinking about it the last two classes we've gone on, and it'd be good just to rest our mind in some of these sayings, and then I'll probably do this whole chart, just read some of these and make a few comments. Then I'll go back and specify one or two of them and show you a teaching that's associated with it. Because we need to get the feel for Swami Aseshananda's 50-year vision, as it were, of he was in India for a while, and then he came west after graduating from a Christian college in India, so he was very well suited to make these observances of the Western culture from both the Christian and the Hindu standpoint. He had this advantage that he had these two religions both in hand, and teaching was taught in both of them. And of course he became a sannyasin and got inspired by Swami Vivekananda, like so many young Hindu boys of the day when Swami was there in India, and started into his path as a sannyasin, but that was after he had graduated from a Christian college, so he was very suited to make some of these statements and to share with us maybe some of the things we ought to watch out for in our Western culture, particularly in terms of religion, but also including in theology of Christianity, the Genesis idea, and science with its evolution theory of billions of years evolution with an end, as it were, or a void. So those things we can take into consideration as we listen to some of his great sayings. He starts off here at the top of this chart, which is number 6 of the 10. The original source is Nirguna Brahman. Nirguna means no attributes. Brahman without any attributes. All you see around here is Brahman with attributes. That is God with form. But the formless Brahman we don't know. That's where the source was for all of this. That is the reason why the West has not been able to produce religious harmony. There is a kind of distinction between Judaism and Christianity. The distinction will remain as long as the Christian faith does not think in terms of a state of consciousness where there is no duality. Because Judaism or Islam or any Semitic religion cannot accept the doctrine of avatar, divine incarnation. So we have Hinduism and Christianity basically accept divine incarnation. The rest of the religions, they don't. They think in terms of prophets or messengers. So it's an interesting point that he makes here. Now, if you put Hindu and Christian together, the difference in their ideology about the divine incarnation is in Christianity there's just one. And in Hinduism there are many, and they keep coming back all the time, over time, cycles of time. So that would be the striking difference between Hinduism and Christianity. Yet that's also their similarities. They do have a common ground they could come together with, which is probably why Vivekananda was here in the West in 1893, sharing with the Christians the non-dual Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. So at the same time, himself a student of Swami Swami Vivekananda and Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna, who were the avatar of the age to him. Avatar Varishtaya Jate Namaha. So we salute this great avatar of the age. Shtapakaya Chadharmasya Swami, who is the steady in all the dharmas. That's, all the dharmas means the Christian dharma, Buddhist dharma, Hindu dharma, is Muslim dharma. He knew all these teachings and he was very steady in their overall essence of them. Shtapakaya Chadharmasya. Then Sarva Dharma Swarupine is also all dharmas. The essence of all dharmas he knew. And so Swami Aseshananda had Sri Ramakrishna to look back to as his guru, as his param guru. And in that way then he could bring something like the Vedanta to the West, Swami Vivekananda, and then Swami Aseshananda could follow. and share this with the Christian religion, some of these great teachings. But the rest, prophets and messengers, will be about as much as they can go. You know what we're saying then is that God does not exist in mankind, is what these religions are saying. God only sends his messengers and his prophets, but God, I and my Father are one, would not be kindly accepted amongst other religions. That you would actually have God and human being meeting in one person. So India is very unique in that way, because it believes that, like Christianity, that God and mankind are one indivisible reality. But in their way of thinking, there never was a separation between God and mankind in the first place. It wasn't that there was a fall from grace and then you had to remember somebody had to send their only begotten Son to save you. It was that you were always that. You were that only begotten Son and only begotten daughter. And that happened before the fall. That happened before inception. That's the ultimate truth of the matter. It's called Advaita, or non-duality. So India starts off on a footing like that. It started off in the very beginningless beginning on the footing of I and my Father are one. That was an accepted truth to them. It wasn't something to be taught later after some fall from grace. So this is why we'll read some of his beautiful teachings here, that India thinks in terms of nirvana and samsara, but the West in its religious thinking thinks in terms of sin and grace, or sin and redemption and grace. So if you think in terms of samsara and nirvana, then, as I say, you think in terms of my nature is divine. Oops, I forgot. Now I remembered. Thank you very much. And so, mind falls out of that state of non-duality by forgetting its true nature. Then it remembers it, and you could call the forgetfulness samsara and the remembrance nirvana. And so that's why I chanted at the beginning of the class, what do we do with these projections? What does even the Great Soul do with these projections of the mind that creates all of this outward manifestation? It just dissolves them back in at the end of the day. You know, they'll arise spontaneously because that's the way what the mind does. If you want to look at it tantrically, self-expression is in the very nature of Brahman, Paramashiva, that is. So it's not something that is alien to it. So, in fact, the word Brahma means Bri, comes from the Sanskrit root to expand. So Brahman is going to naturally expand just by its presence. And like vegetables hop around in a pot if you turn on the heat. See, they're not moving of their own accord, they're moving by some other power. And just like that, Brahman is that heat. Brahman Shakti is that heat, you might say, and everything moves because of that power. But the source of it, where is it? Well, he's saying Nirguna Brahman is where the source is. Pure conscious awareness that is free of attributes. So we have to meditate on free of attributes. If we hear Nirguna, the gunas have been made extinct. Gunas are activity, thought, energy, and so forth. Those are the gunas. So we have to think that the original source of everything is near extinct. Those do not exist in Brahman, nirguna. So if we want to go to the source, then we're going to have to meditate on formless reality and turn ourselves into that non-dual state. So anything that comes up as a projection is going to have to fall back into it, into that source. See? And then, so the rising and falling is all a phenomena, like waves on an ocean, rising and falling off an ocean, but the ocean in its depths never changes. So those kinds of thoughts are in the minds again of a Jivan Mukta. Let's go on and read some more. He talks about Swami Vivekananda. He says, Swami Vivekananda came to give Advaita to Western man. Idea, be a Jivan Mukta. Many have listened, few have tried to practice it. In order to be a Jivan Mukta, you cannot think in terms of the reality of the world. The West has accepted the world to be real. Why? Because the people here are taught that God created the world. So, another of his great statements about the mind's projecting powers and leaving the non-dual Brahman free and pure of creation, preservation, and destruction. If you do that, then you're not going to make the mistake of blaming God for war, blaming God when your life goes sour, blaming God when your loved ones die, and so forth and so on, that people are superimposing over divine reality, which actually is nirguna, without attributes. It's pure and perfect, and it's beyond form, and it's beyond time and space. So why drag it into form and time and space? Why not just leave it pure and perfect and meditate on it and know that I and my Father are one eventually by that meditation? But instead, what are you going to do? You're going to foist the idea that God created the world, and then creation, preservation, and destruction all of a sudden belong to God, when they really should belong to the mind. The individual mind, the collective mind, and the cosmic mind are the locus for all of creation. That is what seems to be created. It's a projection that's going on, like those many waves rising off an ocean, and you get hypnotized by those waves. Try and count them all. Good luck with that. That's getting hypnotized by Maya. But if you see the depths of the ocean underneath, then you can stay in an indivisible state of peace and bliss and love and light and non-duality. So that's what Swami Vivekananda came to bring to Western man. It's this idea or this principle or this axiom of Advaita Vedanta. And he would say, Swami Aseshanandaji would bring together some beautiful teachings. This is a very beautiful quote. Your body is a symbol of existence. Your mind is a symbol of consciousness. But your soul, Atman, is pure awareness. So talk about body-mind mechanism and going beyond it, basically. This is a very good example of that. That your body exists is actually a proof that God exists, because God has taken a form, as it were. Now, you may not have realized that yet, but if you knew that your source was Nirguna Brahman, then you would say that the ocean can break into waves, or you can say the ocean can break into icebergs, and then the icebergs can melt into the sun of wisdom again. That's how Sri Ramakrishna put it. So sometimes there are these great icebergs that become so thick and big that they become almost like stone. They don't melt under the sun. That would be these great souls that are remembered from age to age. A whole age could pass, pralaya, dissolution could happen, and another cycle would begin, and people would still remember beings like Lord Buddha and Krishna and Jesus Christ and others, because they never melted in the cosmic mind. They were so powerful that they persisted beyond the dissolution of cycles in time. That's why they stay in your mind. And actually that's a very good teaching about how you can keep memory of God in your mind. That memory is called smriti hetu. You have a memory in your mind, way back in the deepest part of your mind, of being in bliss, and of being one with God, also of dying and being born. That's way back in your mind. Those are memories that a Jivan Mukta brings forward, but the rest of us push back. See, oh, I don't want to think about my death. But if you thought about your death, then you'd think about your rebirth. And if you thought about your rebirth, you could get free and be a Jivan Mukta, a birthless, deathless soul. And then it wouldn't matter whether you took bodies or not. You'd be free at all times. Pass your time contentedly, meditate on oneness, and be free, as Shankara said in his Viveka Chudamani. So your body is a symbol of existence. It's just like saying objects are a sign of God. We take them for pleasure, and we take them for ownership, and we take them for money and wealth, and a sign of prosperity and so forth. But we've never taken them yet for a sign that God exists. And When you find out how empty they are, you'll find out that God as Nirguna Brahman exists too. When you take them for signs of God, then you're talking about Saguna Brahman. Basically, God is all this, you see. But then you find out that the objects are empty, and you object to objects, and then you begin to realize that they're coming from an indivisible, formless state. They come through deep sleep as seeds, and then into dreaming, and then into waking, and then they go back to dreaming tonight, and then they go back to deep sleep, and they're gone again, you see. And that 24-hour period where you wake and dream and deep sleep is just like 4,320,000,000 year cycle. And it's also like a 1 minute breath, in breath, held breath, and out breath. So constant, everything's reminding you of this cycling that's going on. You're standing by. If you're standing by as witness, then you're a Jivan Mukta. If you're getting drug from the past to the present to the future, then you're bound soul. You're a bound soul. So if your body is a symbol of existence, your mind is a symbol of consciousness. Isn't that a nice distinction? So you have to make a distinction between the body and the mind, between matter and thought, if you want to put it that way. So the fact that you think then means that you have consciousness. So consciousness must be an interesting element in it. Remember this chart? We went back and looked at, in the very first class, we looked at the difference between Vedanta's non-origination principle, Christianity's theology, and science's evolution. And we saw the difference in the three looks. And we want to take a look at that again soon, but I want to stay with this plan of going through some of these sayings to get our minds thinking like a Jivan Mukta would think. See, pretty soon your mind will stay there all the time. And I spent enough time pondering my Guru's teachings, and one day I woke up and my ignorance was gone. And how did I know that? Because my mind wouldn't stop thinking of God. I couldn't stop it from thinking about higher things. So at first it's difficult, you see. It's, I want to stay here in the low atmospheres. Pleasure with objects and brooding and entertaining my fears and engaging in pleasures. Pretty soon that became insipid, and my mind just wanted to stay like a kite high in the sky. And preferred that. Actually gained the habit of that. And then it all became effortless. You see, like the sailor who puts out to sea and encounters a storm, but then after he bails water and weathers the storm, he gets beyond the storm, then he can just sail in clear skies, and he can put the rudder on automatic and sit back and smoke his pipe. The happy sailor, peaceful and content. So that's how Sri Ramakrishna described the Jivan Mukta living in a state of equanimity, quiescence of mind, peace of mind, beatitude, silence. But your soul is pure awareness, so he makes a beautiful distinction, but also a nice amalgam of existence, consciousness, and awareness. Body, mind, and soul. And he's using words like are and is. You see, you are that. Your body is a sign. You are that liberated soul. So that's important to note, that he's very positively inclined in everything he says. Even when he's criticizing or when he's giving constructive criticism, the words that he's couching that in are positive. See? And we know that negative teachings are very good for us. So India is no slouch in that department. Let's take another. This one in the middle. The Indian way of thinking is not sin and salvation. It is samsara and nirvana. Samsara means a wheel, birth, death, and rebirth, the wheel of samsara. But when you stop that wheel, there is nirvana. Nirvana means atmagyanam. You realize your true nature to be infinite consciousness, infinite wisdom, infinite life, and infinite spirit. Until then, you are the infinite spirit dreaming finite dreams. So wake up. Wake up from this dream. So the difference between a Jivan Mukta and an ordinary soul would be that one is still sleeping and dreaming, birth, life, death, hopes, fears, so forth. And the other has attained peace and has put the dream to death. Put death in its own grave even. So he makes a nice distinction between the Western way of thinking, particularly in theology, and the Eastern way of thinking in India. That is sin and salvation and so forth, as compared to nirvana and samsara. See how beautifully you take the Nirguna Brahman out of the picture, because it's transcendent. If you fell into any of those ideas about sin and salvation, and you drag God into that, then God has to be a just God, or God has to be an impartial God, or he's not impartial. He gets blamed for the good thing, for the bad things that happen, and then praised for the good things that happen and blamed for the bad things that happen. And all of a sudden it's not a God anymore. Basically you're just talking about human beings, their egos. And of course we know how Swami Aseshanandaji spoke about that. We'll see that in the next chart. So thinking in terms of samsara and nirvana, a wheel of birth, life, and death, and getting off that wheel of birth, life, and death and being free is the point. Here's another one. When you know the word guru, you will reach your higher state of consciousness and identify him with God. And you will know that it is God who speaks through the illumined guru and an avatar as well. So there's back to the idea of India's avatar, a non-dual being, and the guru being a manifestation of God. But you have to know the word guru first. Many people don't know that word. In fact, it's had some runarounds with the guru in the West, and these gurus haven't all been what they've been chalked up to be. So you have to find a guru like he found in Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda. And then you'll know that by the higher quality of truth, the Dharma that's always coming forth from them. And also by that non-duality that underlies it all. And he was a renunciate. He was a monk. So he says here, divine life will never come unless you practice renunciation every moment of your life. What are you to renounce? According to Shankara, 3 things. You have to renounce your desires perpetuating this samsara. Samsara has come on account of unfulfilled desire. That means it is unfulfilled desire that has brought you here. Next, renounce aparavidya and focus on lower knowledge that causes you to forget your real self. That is, you are identifying yourself with your apparent self. Finally, you must transcend death and get free. Your future is unknown and the present is uncertain. This is the predicament of sleeping mankind. So a good quote that goes along with that idea of waking up from dreams. The predicament of sleeping mankind is that the future is unknown and the present is uncertain. But both past and present and future, all 3, are transcended by the Jivan Mukta. They are living in a state of what's called an eternal moment. The eternal moment is beyond time. 2 more here to entertain on this chart. If a Western scientist would say that matter is akin to consciousness via thought, then he would transcend the scientific plane. He would become a mystic. But here is not just mysticism, it is realization, nirvikalpa samadhi. That is why Swami Brahmananda declared in the Eternal Companion, quote, "Show me the line of demarcation where matter ends and spirit begins." We had our last series here in Hawaii, we called it The Eternal Companion. We were looking at all the aspects of that. Well, that book, Eternal Companion, is all about Swami Brahmananda, who is Swami Vivekananda's brother monk, and the first president of the Ramakrishna order, a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, and they called him his spiritual son. So Brahmananda made statements like that. Show me the line of demarcation where matter ends and spirit begins. So as if there is no line. So there's just one indivisible consciousness, but by casting a line between the two, then you fall into this idea of two-ness or duality. Then duality starts to take over the mind, and it becomes a matter of variety and variegation. Pretty soon you've got what's called scattered mind, and too many things to consider at once, and that center of oneness is missing. It's covered over now. He says further, until you conquer time, you will be tossed in the waves of Maya. The end of time, space, and causality will come only with enlightenment. An enlightened soul alone can teach that, not scientists, not theologians, nor a faithful devotee of a dualistic philosophy. So Swami Aseshanandaji encountered all of these, scientists, theologians, and faithful devotees of dualistic philosophies. And he's making the point here that the end of time, space, and causality is not found in that level of thinking, these three kinds of beings. You have to become a jivan mukta to get beyond time, space, and causality. Time, space, and causality is Maya, or samsara. And so you're caught in time, space, and causality. You're also caught in that web of samsara, of life, birth, death, and rebirth. See, all of those connect, and so you're going to have to look at that very closely and take yourself out of the ocean of Maya, or dive deep into the ocean of Nirguna Brahma at the top. So both of these quotes connect with each other, top and bottom, very well. Now, since we're looking at scientists, theologians, and philosophers, let's go back to this chart real quick and finish it, because we only took about the first third of it when we studied it, and I left these other 2/3 for this third class. Remember, Vedanta speaks in terms of non-origination. Non-origination means basically a jati, or a jatavada, means there is no beginning, middle, and end to anything. And that's all an apparent projection of your mind in Maya, is that there are beginnings, middles, and ends. So non-origination just means what it says. It's the best English word we could come up for a jativada with. It's basically there was never any beginning to any of this. It's just everything is. Sarvosmi. It's all existence. Sort of like going back to this, your body, your thought, and your soul all are. That is, they epitomize existence for you. They are your existence. And so when you talk in terms of non-origination, you're going to have to link those two up. To know that you're a birthless, deathless soul and you're a jivan mukta is based on the fact that you are now in full acceptance of the fact that there is no beginning, middle, and end to anything. There's just there's just consciousness. And sometimes it moves and sometimes it doesn't. Sri Ramakrishna put that very simply for us by the analogy of the snake on the floor. Sometimes it's sitting still and you think maybe it's a rope, you see. That can go in a different direction, teaching of Vedanta, of course, snake and the rope. But the snake is sitting there and you think that it's dead or it's a rope. All of a sudden it wriggles across the floor. Well, Sri Ramakrishna said that's exactly like God, consciousness is that sometimes it's still and silent, but sometimes it has that dynamic power in it where it can all of a sudden move. And with that as a foundation, Tantra philosophy was developed. You see, Shiva and Shakti, the stationary and the dynamic, the immovable and the movable, the static and the dynamic. See, so basically, if you have that kind of idea, then you're not caught between a problem between the line of demarcation. You see this all of a sudden there. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if you put a stick across a mud puddle. See, all of a sudden it looks like it's two puddles, right? You lift it back off and it's always one. So there's always this idea in duality. This is why a dualistic, even a devotee of a dualistic philosophy can't cure the problems of Maya for you, cure your fears and your doubts and your ignorance and your misgivings and so forth. You have to go to a Jivan Mukta. And there'll be more quotes about that coming up that are very beautiful. Only a Jivan Mukta will be able to do that for you. So that's non-origination. We looked at Genesis and its idea that consciousness is born in time and space and it passes through various modes of time, space, and causality. Vedanta is not going to be accepting that, not Advaita. The soul doesn't move, it stays in one place. And what moves is its dream projection. It's just like you dream tonight laying on your bed, but your body doesn't go anywhere, and you dream, and that dream seems real to you. In the same way, all of this is movement, is also a projection called your dream, and you're somewhere at the foundation of it, unmoving. You're the seer of the scene, and sometimes you're even the unseen seer. So you're that foundation or that consciousness upon which everything else is moving, but you're static and the witness of all phenomena. Well, these great sayings in English have come out of Swami Vivekananda's visit here in 1893. We've got a very good language now, Vedantically and Buddhistically speaking, for these teachings of the Dharma in English. So we can help you understand these, help us all understand these great principles. And we also know science and what it has to do with its idea of what consciousness is. Maybe there is no consciousness separate from matter for science. It's all in matter. And so choose your path. And I say if you go over here, choose your poison. See, which one are you going to choose? The good thing about theology is that it believes in God, but the God that it believes in is not clearly expressed. The good thing about science is that it's practical and scientific, but it doesn't believe in God, and it only believes in matter. So you're going to have to extract out of these two pathways, which are the only two pathways that are available to us, ordinary people, in today's day and age. You're going to have to try and either choose or put them together in some way, and it's a rock and a hard place. That's how Swami Aseshanandaji described it. He said, when I came to this country, you were all talking, you were at loggerheads. Science and religion were at loggerheads, and you couldn't come up with a solution. So he avers that a Jivan Mukta will come up with a solution for you. But you're going to have to listen to the Jivan Mukta, who is a free soul, and follow the practice that the Jivan Mukta prescribes in order to turn yourself into the image of God. Maybe you don't believe that you can be one with God or that you are one with God. But you can certainly cut yourself in the image of God. They talked to Swami Brahmananda once, the eternal companion. One person kept talking for a long time and finally said to the Swami, Swami, what would you do if you found out that all of Vedanta and all these philosophies and all these beautiful truths that you're talking about, that God didn't actually exist? And Swami said, I wouldn't change the way I'm living at all. It's probably easy for him to say that because he knew God doesn't exist. Not in the way that most people think. I mean, when you think of something Nirguna Brahman without attributes, where is existence in it? Non-existence and existence both have melded into that, and it's indescribable. So God is indescribable. We've always agreed upon that point. Transcendent and beyond time and space. So is that existence? Sounds like non-existence to me. Abhava. So Lord Vashishta says, gain abhava, this non-existence, and wear it like a sword. Because you are the one that's existing, and you're wielding non-existence as your sword, you see. I mean, let me show you a teaching on the Great Seal here in a second, as soon as we finish this. It has to do with nirvana and samsara. And that can help explain this line of demarcation that we want to remove. And take our dualistic thinking and fuse it into one. Take what is external, what is internal, and render it into one indivisible state. Isn't that what I just chanted at the beginning of this class? So you've fallen into the idea that there's only the external, science, matter, right? But now, all of a sudden, you came along and you got a little religion, and now you think, oh, there's an inside too. See, there's an outside matter and there's an inside called heaven. Now, what would happen if I could try and fuse those two into one thing? And that's basically what you'd end up with, non-origination, if you took it to the hilt of your thinking process. So these non-dualistic thinkers, as contradictory as that sounds, have come to us from this great land of Mother India and brought us these powerful systems of teaching, like Advaita Vedanta and Zen Buddhism and others that are really beyond thinking, the best of thought, and also beyond thinking. And they'll take this line of demarcation and they'll smooth it over. Or they'll take these two black rocks of existence and non-existence and smash them together, and what's left over will be truth. See? It won't be something that can be easily spoken about at that point. You might go into deep silence, or, maybe even nirvikalpa samadhi. So you might go into nirvikalpa samadhi. Well, we took this and we saw how the origin of consciousness is treated by the three. Let's take, because of what he's saying here on the chart, let's take what's next, the origin of human beings. What about you? Consciousness is transcendent of forms, so you couldn't call a human being consciousness with a capital C. You'd have to call Brahman consciousness or formlessness consciousness, but you have a form, obviously. So then we're going to have to deal next with the human being. How do we see the human being? How does science view the human being? How does theology view the human being? And how does Vedanta view the human being? Well, science says all beings are inseparable from nature. Basically, that's what is inferred. You come out of nature, you live in nature, you die in nature, and there's no other element anywhere. No inward element to evolve to. It's all evolution. So basically, you're matter. And that line of thinking has been grabbed upon by atheists and agnostics and materialists for several hundred years now, and longer than that in Europe. So you'll always note the difference between a materialist and a person who believes in something beyond. India is always, Swami Aseshanandaji says, always thinking about beyond. That was one of his quotes. If the idea of what's beyond occurs to you, then you're not a materialist. But otherwise, if you don't even think of God by accident, then pretty much, as Sri Ramakrishna said, pretty much a certain thing that you believe in matter, and that's all. What about science? What about theology? All beings are separate from and conceived by a creator. So here is where the problem of avatar is going to come in. What could also be a solution in that case, depending on how you treat it. But basically, you're going to live and die by a creator. And so that's an intermediary to India called Ishvara we're talking about. Or if you want to even cite a trinity for it, then it's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Right, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, as we chant. So basically, you'll find out that is also an intermediary through which you get to the formless Brahman, through form to formlessness, or from gross form to subtle form to causal form, from your gross body to your subtle body to your causal body, from waking to dreaming to deep sleep, from A to U to M. However you want to speak about it, from Bur to Bhuva to Swaha, the three worlds, you'll make your way through this, and you'll find out that consciousness is apparently transitioning. And then you'll find out after you look at transitioning consciousness that there's a witness looking on the transition, and that would be immovable. That would be Nirguna Brahman. So in that way, the deep thinker, the Jivanmukta, will come through that mechanism to a higher thought. That's why he used to say, you have to accept involution, not just evolution. So that's why I say in Christianity there is some sort of idea of involution going on. It's probably not all that well defined as it is in, say, Samkhya Yoga of India, or in Shaivism in India. But nonetheless, there is some sort of idea of involving to a subtler state. Now, if that involution is inward, like Christ said it was, kings of heaven are within you, then we give applause to Christianity. If that involution is also outward, like it is with science, and you start looking up in the sky, then both science and religion have become infected with ignorance. They're fecked, as the Irish say. So they're thinking wrongity wrong about it all. It's not upward and it's not outward, it's always inward. And so involution will have to be, whether it's going to heaven, or it's going inwards to the three worlds, or whether it's going back to the source of Brahman, it's going to have to be an inward movement. If that's missing in your ideology, well, then the Jivanmuktas, the seers, the sages, the rishis, the yogis, the avadhuts, and other great souls will not touch it with a 10-foot pole, I think the expression is. Will not touch it. It's untenable and unacceptable to them. So this is one of the benefits about putting these three side by side, as I've done here in this chart. Pretty much this chart was inspired in me by listening to Swami Aseshanandaji's various quotes. So the result of he listening to Sri Ramakrishna, to Holy Mother, and to some of the great disciples that he lived with of Sri Ramakrishna, and then coming to the West and speaking to his audience and speaking to me, and my understanding of what he said has now come down in the form of this very simple chart. Actually, it's understated, each one of these, because there's not enough room on a chart to flesh it out, as they say. But nonetheless, you get the idea of the difference between theology, evolution, and non-origination. That's the point we're trying to make. Vedanta says, all beings are non-originated and inseparable from reality. See, that's the footing. In the beginning was the Word, but where was the Word? India would want to know. It was with God, and then it was God. So when it was with God, it was two things, God and His Word. But when it was God, it was one thing. So you're going to have to go beyond origins to non-origins to understand this. And if your science, your wise men of the day, called scientists, are only playing around in space with earth, air, fire, water, and ether, that's their whole ideation, then you're not going to have any idea of non-origination. It's going to be the furthest thing from your mind. That's why Gaudapada surprised the whole religious and spiritual and philosophical world in 600 AD with his commentary on the Mandukya Upanishad. Even the Western philosophers sat up and took notice, because the word in there was Ajativada. Guess what, everyone? There is no origination to anything. We only accept non-origination as our foundation. Everything else is a mere dream. So that's where you all of a sudden find your ideal. You see, if you're a deep thinker like Swami Aseshananda, that attracts me. That's unique. That gives me inspiration. Or if you're in Hawaii, it gives you chicken skin brought up. See? Gives you chicken skin, you see, because it really inspires you. So then you will have found your mead. You will have found your whole purpose of existence. The whole reason for being in the body is to find out everything is non-originated. What does it say from top to bottom? It has no origin. It's one indivisible mass of self-aware, and it's self-aware by nature. It's not made self-aware over time, or by going to heaven, or by visiting the gods, or by being saved by an avatar. It's self-aware by nature. Your being is divine. You've just fallen away from it or forgotten it. It's ever free and transcendent of creation, and it assumes forms, but it remains formless. Basically, these are 4 great bullet points for non-origination in India. Does it sound sensible to you, or does it even sound like a breath of fresh air in the tepid atmosphere of what other people and other ideologies would think, like consciousness is divided into many separate souls. Consciousness depends on creation and a creator, and consciousness is born in form. You can't create a soul in India, in Vedanta. Souls don't get created. Minds get formed, you see, and bodies get formed from minds. But the soul is acreate. It was actually a word, since there was none in English, that Swami Vivekananda used in 1893 when he came to the West. Acreate, he said. You're thinking in terms of creation, of theology and Genesis and so forth. You must think in terms of the soul being acreate. And they were kind of, sort of like throwing a puzzling word at them, to turn Maya on its ear and get them thinking in a different direction. The way the Indian seers had thought for thousands of years. Coming into this infantile culture called America, who were involved in big tent revivals and seances in parlors, trying to contact their departed ancestors. That's what he saw when he came here. But what he brought with him was an eternal Dharma that, historically speaking, alone was thousands of years old. But beyond that was this idea of timelessness, of truth eternal, and of the soul's innate perfection. See, wasn't thinking in terms of, the world got created, took billions of years for it to come, then 5 million years of the march of the hominidae, then the monkeys, then the humans. Oh my Lord, you see, all the time God is looking on to this process. Well, not here, maybe here, but here you are that's looking on. Let's look at then objects, origin of human beings. We said all beings are inseparable from nature. See, so good luck with that. Birth, life, and death is yours, and it only happens once, and there's no consciousness behind it afterwards or before it. Not that's posited in science. Maybe it's just not their territory, you see. They're physicists, they're not metaphysicists, and they're not spiritualists, and they're not philosophers, so it's just not their territory. But statement of fact, that's all you're going to get. You're born and you live and you die in nature, and there's no consciousness prior to that posited, and there's no consciousness that comes after it. And who would want to blame the scientists when you got into the mess that Genesis posed after thousands of years? See, you wouldn't want to go to heaven either, you see, if it just some sort of a dream that someone was, pie in the sky dream someone was foisting upon you. So how can you blame the scientists for keeping hands off of religion? I mean, you have great scientists like Einstein who believed in God. But Einstein also saw beyond time at the end of his life. He made that statement that time was an illusion. So Western scientists were beginning to see there's something that was beyond Genesis and all that, and began to call it Gayatri. And Gayatri was like the ancient mother principle, you see. So all beings are non-originated and inseparable from reality. In science, the lives of beings are based upon the real existence of matter. Just another way of saying this, really, but let's just drive in the stake here a bit into the heart of the matter. The lives of beings are based upon the real existence of matter. This emphasis is switched here. Matter is real. See, that's their only reality, really. But in theology, after conception, beings live on earth, then go to heaven or hell. In Vedanta, human beings who are really unborn engage in dream life. Back to many of his sayings here, or several of his sayings on this chart, right? It's all a dream. Wake up from it, he says. Wake up from this dream. You are the infinite spirit. Atmagyan, the true nature of your soul will lead you there. You'll get off the wheel of samsara. We'll look at a chart on that in a minute. Let's take another one here. Human beings, in science, human beings are of the nature of matter and have no soul. None posited again. In theology, human beings are so many souls, all restricted to one lifetime. Of course, there is heaven and hell, if you want to call that other lifetime. But if you just have one lifetime to accept Jesus and get to these places or not, then that's what they believe. The idea of many lifetimes to perfect yourself, you'll find that in yoga, in Indian yoga. Krishna speaks about it in the Gita. You find out something about your divine nature, you pass away before you realize it. When you come back in the next lifetime, you pick up a thread, Krishna says, of that remembrance of studying in a past lifetime, and you make more headway in the next lifetime. This is called krama mukti. You're going to liberation slowly, lifetime by lifetime. And heaven and hell pretty much is in your existence. It is, this world is heaven, this world is hell at the same time. So you might as well not create three divisions. You might as well just put right here, heaven, earth, and transcendence are all right here. Hell, earth, heaven, and Brahman, all right here in the same one consciousness, one atmosphere, one divine atmosphere. Now, where do you want to be? Sort of like saying the four yugas, Kali, Dwapara, Treta, Satya Yuga, right? There's these four great ages of time with thousands and thousands of years in each one of them. And it's linear, you see. But why don't you just take it like this and stack it like a layer cake? See, all of a sudden then, time is all in one moment. And what level of a layer cake do you want to be? Probably the frosting. If you want to be in Satya Yuga, then you rise to the top. You foment a bit and rise to the top, you see. And then you can get out of even Satya Yuga to a timeless, deathless place. A timeless, deathless state of awareness. So if you look at time linearly, or you can look at it as a layer cake. But looking at it as a layer cake, all of a sudden, you're looking at it as the Lord Buddha would see it. He could get himself in and out of the cycles of time because he was witness of the cycles of time. There's another great soul, of course, we think of right away, Lord Shiva, who is Trikaladarshi. See, he's a witness of the three phases of time, past, present, and future. So human beings are really one birthless, deathless soul. Science says intelligence is only energy formed by experiences in matter. So that's our mind's intelligence. Theology, intelligence is God-given associated with secular knowledge. So if we say in our country here, there's an intelligent person, then basically that's based on how much they know, how much they learned in college, and how much worldly knowledge they have, what they know about life, and how worldly wise they are. But in Vedanta, intelligence is inherently spiritual and is the nature of sentiency. So that's buddhi. That's the highest intelligence, what Lord Buddha called pragyaparam. That's inherent in you. And there's some nice sayings that Swami Aseshanandaji makes about science splitting the atom and leading us to this idea that there are other particles of intelligence that we can split. We don't just have to split the physical atom and release an outward explosion for violence, but we can get the atoms of our intelligence and split them and implode instead of explode these huge amounts of bliss by thinking of wisdom. And all of these here on this chart are just his splitting of his own intelligent particles to release for the good, highest good of others, these great sayings of wisdom. Let's look at one other category here. Origin of nature, worlds, and objects. So you see how Vedanta theology and science have looked at consciousness, at human beings. Now let's see how they look at the origin of nature, worlds, and objects. In science, nature is the only reality and is formed by the force of energy, apparently so. In theology, nature is created by the Word of God via the creation theory. And in Vedanta, nature is an eternal with no beginning, middle, or end. There's non-origination again. So it's not just Brahman that's non-originated, it's not just Atman, your true nature, that's non-originated, and it's not just mind that's non-originated, nature also unoriginated. It's eternal. Where are you going to have to go to know that? To Mother India and her teaching of unmanifested Prakriti. Because science is all about manifested Prakriti, right? In fact, they don't even know there is an unmanifested Prakriti. They thought that matter came from energy. But it didn't just come from energy, it came from mind. And it didn't just come from mind, it came from the soul, see, from intelligence. This very intelligence that they're talking about here. So, in that case, you're tracing the origins of things back to a non-originated source. And that's always been the conclusion, siddhanta is the Sanskrit word, of the Indian rishis in any given siddhanta, in any given darshana, in any given philosophy or movement, religious movement, has been the conclusion. You're tracing the origins of things back to a non-originated source. So, if you do that, then you'll find out that everything you searched, everything you researched, everything that was in the nature of your search inward is unoriginated. There's no birth, life, and death. There's no creation, preservation, and destruction going on. It's all apparent. It's all dreamlike. There's just this one state of consciousness out of which all of this dreams, see, or gets projected. And lo and behold, you find yourself there at the hub of it doing the dreaming. So that's why he wants you to wake up from those dreams. That's called enlightenment. And when you're enlightened, you become a jivan mukta. Science believes that world, species, objects evolve over a vast expanse of time. Okay. Theology, worlds and objects are real and are formed in a 7-day cycle. That is creation, the 7-day creation theory. In Vedanta, objects and worlds are, as forms, are projections of the mind in Maya. So you'd have to know how powerful your mind is, and if you get, say, 8 billion minds together, and you've got a planet, and that planet seems real to you, and the way they think scientifically and religiously is going to influence the outcome of things. But you've got a few people going against the grain here. There aren't 8 billion in numbers, but there's several thousand, and they come every once in a while to tell you that all of this is unoriginated, that the foundation of everything is the divine soul, which does not change, which is not born, which does not die, does not go through transformations. It's a jativada, it's a jati, and it's a parinama. And those have been the pillars upon which India built its edifice of non-duality upon, called Advaita Vedanta. From the beginningless beginning, this truth will come back again and again and suggest itself on wayward thought, on incomplete or immature ideologies, and it'll teach them, see, teach them and bring them into a full realization. In science, matter and energy are real. and their permutations are actual. That is, the transformation is real. You believe in something changing in your test tube or in your laboratory, see, in your experiment and so forth. Oh, look, it's changing. It's real. It's real. And that you're restricted to that test tube in that laboratory. And you don't consider the consciousness looking on really is sentient, you see. What's witnessing is the real. You overlook that for the sake of the experiment. And life is just one big experiment like that, with the 5 elements constantly in flux. And your consciousness is left out of the equation, not only as an existence, but as a potential creator or projector of that experiment. Or maybe here you'd want to foist it on God. See? So nature gets the blame here, God gets the blame here. And the modus operandi of the whole thing is transformation. You're basing your conclusions on changing matter or changing thought. In Christianity, via transformation, the spirit becomes flesh and matter. So there, even in religion, all of a sudden, you believe in transformation. That God somehow became the human being. Of course, there's only one of those, that's Jesus. God begot his only begotten Son and so forth. And that became the flesh, spirit in the flesh. But the rest of us, what happened to us? Well, you'd have to look back here in the origin of human beings to find out what they think. But you also have science, its version, and you also have Advaita Vedanta coming forward to say that all transformation is non-actual. There is just one unchanging reality. And that one unchanging reality is real with a capital R. And everything that changes is its permutation, but it's non-actual permutation. The change itself is not real. There's where you get beyond the line of demarcation between matter and spirit, you see. And all of a sudden, it's one homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness, to quote the scriptures of India. It's all one homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness, no divisions, no compartments, no transformations, no changes. That's all in the realm of your ideation. Your ignorance is giving rise to that. So these systems, according to Vedanta, are ignorant of the truth. They're ignorant of spirituality. And they're devoid of even higher religion if they're merely fundamentalist or dualistic. They haven't seen the non-dual yet. They're not considering the non-dual yet. What to speak of having the non-dual being the premise upon which everything exists? In Mother India, that's what it is. The last entry here, and then we need to take a break. Matter and energy are interchangeable and proceed out of a physical void. That was an interesting advancement made in science. Swami Vivekananda also was there on the scene in 1893 at the Parliament of Religions and at the First World's Fair in Chicago, up in Canada, where they were talking about this matter and energy converting, so forth. So that was, let's call it a dubious gift of science. See, because you're still believing in transformation, aren't you? You're still believing that the change is real. And you're still in the realm of matter and energy, but the energy you're thinking of is not psychic energy. It's just physical energy, kinetic and so forth. Lightning and other forces in nature. So you haven't yet even graduated to the place where the energy of thought is being considered. Because the energy of thought also is based in nature, isn't it? Your consciousness was born in nature, your brain was conceived in nature and developed over time in nature. It's all about physical nature with no place to go, and it's all about evolution with no involution at its end. So that's where you're not only caught between a rock and a hard place, you're up a creek without a paddle if you believe in anything that has to do with a source. Like you, the source of who you are, the source of what consciousness is, and the source of all of its consciousness manifestations. So I'm trying my best here to give some sort of a rendering of where these kinds of statements come from in the Jivan Mukta. They're so natural to that person. It's become the way they think and are, and they've had it validated by their own teachers. And those teachers stretch back in lineages whose origins are inside, with not just with the ancestors in heaven, but with the rishis and sages and seers and great thinkers that are in a realm that is far beyond a mere physical realm. With a few minutes remaining, then let's finish this up. This last entry here. In theology, nature is at first non-existent, then has a beginning when it gets created out of nothing. So science has its big bang, but Christianity has its creator. So as far as we can tell, the creator will breathe life into the soul. And so you're going to have to go to God for your next breath of air, you see. That is a creator God. But you yourself being that was never considered, that you breathe life into your own soul. Isn't it always been the case? You breathe yourself. You bind yourself. You free yourself. Nobody can help you do that or keep you from doing it if you want to do that. And that's always been at the foundation of any great philosophy who takes freedom with a capital F seriously. There's no dependence on anything. What does Vedanta say? Nature has two modes, manifest and unmanifested. The former rises from the latter, but both are transitory. Reality transcends them. That's very well put. See, nature has two modes, the manifested and the unmanifested. The manifested came from the unmanifested. See, we fall out right there as Western thinkers. Science, so forth. And in theology, it's not complete. The connections aren't made for us. Nobody in church is teaching you this, that the outer came from the inner. There is an outer, and if it's posited correctly, there is an inner called heaven, an outer earth and an inner heaven. But you have to make sure that when you say earth came from heaven, that heaven is an internal land, not an outer land. You see, in any way, shape, or form, it has to be internal. And then you'll step from Bur to Bhuva to Swaha. You'll go from the humans to the ancestors to the gods. And this is very well outlined in all of India's darshanas. They want to make these connections for you and leave you no doubt. So we're talking pretty much about lands and nature, aren't we? Nature, worlds and objects. So worlds, it's plural, folks. It's not singular, world. It's singular here, see, in science. But worlds we're talking about. Where are these other worlds inside? And how does the soul transmigrate to get to them? In and out. See, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep are one way of saying that. But when the body dies, that's not just the end of a physical body, it's the end of its dream on earth. So is it going to go back to the source of its dream? So that's going to be in the bardo, after death, the Tibetan Buddhists call it. And that's what I want to start the class out in the second half with, showing you the difference between nirvana and samsara, and the teaching of Tibetan Buddhism called the Great Seal, Mahamudra. And we'll look into what Swami Vivekananda says here about Atmagyanam, true knowledge, and how it refers to not just pinioning yourself into some ideology that makes you dependent upon a savior, but freeing yourself and realizing that consciousness, human beings, the world, time, space, objects, and everything are one indivisible state of awareness that is unoriginated. And that all beginnings, middles, and ends are myths. And you're a Jivan Mukta if you realize that and then you posit yourself and abide in that understanding. No matter if you take a body or beyond the body, you're free. That's Jivan Mukta, living, liberated being. So here, we'll take our break and return in 15 minutes, and I'll show you the Great Seal teaching of Tibetan Buddhism. Thank you for your kind attentions. We now take up the second half of our third class in this 5-class series on Advaita Vedanta and Jivan Mukta. And might make an announcement that we're going to break week after next for our retreat here in Hawaii. So you'll want to know that as live stream viewers. We're doing this retreat called Precipitous Ascent into Higher Awareness. And that's here on the Big Island. For a three-day weekend, we're all going to gather together and look at these teachings that take us into a non-dual state. A very non-dual state that Swami Aseshanandaji here is epitomized to us when we were with him. I used to spend time with him and was very amazed at this unchanging. It just didn't speak in terms of a parinama, no change, no transformation, but he lived it in his life too. He was always the same great soul, always noble, always speaking the truth, not interested in anything else but that. And he would come down from that level of truth to teach us the Dharma, because you do need to do that. Come down from the realm of consciousness to the realm of intelligence, and you'll see that many of his quotes here, or some of them, are about that. He wants to make, and in terms of science too, that you have to get beyond the scientific intellectual frame of reference. He used to say that all the time. You must get beyond the scientific and intellectual frame of reference to understand what a Jivan Mukta knows, has realized. So before we leave this chart, I just wanted to do the very last quote on it because it kind of summates it all very nicely. I'm so glad that I found this. He says, "Theologians have fashioned this universe into a close-knit, tiny little box. Science has rendered it into an ever-expanding universe. Scientists think that matter is indestructible. No, matter is not indestructible, nor is it destructible. It is unoriginated." So, putting together theology and science and their conclusions and contrasting them to the conclusion of Vedanta, then you're going to have to look into this word, ajati, or non-origination, and see what is meant by that, either in Sanskrit or in English or both. And you'll find the birthless, deathless, changeless nature of everything is what's being indicated, pointed at, or at least inferred in all the teachings of the Dharma. And when you use that as the thread between the pearls, and then all the pearls then can be held together beautifully, pearls of life and birth and death and philosophy and Dharma and teachings and everything, held together by this one thread that's circulating inside of all, that's usually unseen, but is very well described there by that word, ajativada. So, close-knit, tiny little box, or an ever-expanding universe, or maybe beyond destruction and non-destruction to this great truth of non-origination. Now, I told you that I would give you this teaching on the Mahamudra, or the Great Seal, but actually what I'm going to do instead is give you this teaching on the stainless cause of the universe. And I brought you a little surprise chart there that I think you'll like. And I'm going to have to be looking from the standpoint of a chart that is the old black and white series. And I'll call that up here right now. And you'll be looking at the new, fresh color version with a painting of Gary Dickens, a Big Island artist here who was a friend of mine who passed away in 2012. I just found out that he was gone, and I hadn't known that for several years, but and this is the way he passed away, they said. He was sitting like this when they found him. And so he was a visionary painter, painted some of the artworks for several of my CD albums that I put out, and he used to paint to my music, he said, a lot. And so he had these dozens and dozens of pieces that he created. Many of them were visionary like this. This particular one is, of course, of a, let's call her a Hawaiian goddess that he viewed through his third eye, coming out of this vision. And so when I saw it, I thought it really would make a good background to the teaching of Lord Vashishta in Yoga Vashishta scripture about the stainless cause of the universe. Because we're talking about evolution and involution, and we're talking about transformation and non-transformation in many of these chants. So maybe to put a capper on this particular set of teachings, we can look at this and see what origins have to give us in India. Now, when we say the genesis and origin theory of Christianity, we're talking about, if you were to describe that and flesh it out in a philosophical way that was understandable and amenable to our understanding, then the Vedantist, the yogi, and the Indian philosopher would applaud that. So it's not that origins are thrown away completely, because in the beginning was the Word. So we have to go back to something called God's Word to understand how vibration came out as worlds and objects and so forth. It's all via vibration. Srishti Rahasya would be how the Tantricists would put that. It's the secret of creation is vibration. So if you're looking into origins from that avenue, then you'd have a solid ground philosophically upon which to proceed. If you're going to create something out of nothing, I'm sorry, like we said, we're not going to accept that. It has to come out of something. Nothing doesn't exist, so something has to come out of something else. And that's how we describe, that's what's happened in the case of evolution. And if we look at it from the standpoint of involution and look back in, we'll find the same thing. We'll find all the elements to our mind's projection, and we'll find that we ourselves were involved in the projection and the withdrawal of everything. Call it Lord Shiva in us, or Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva in us. And this is also how the soul wakes up from the dream, because if it's a given then that it is dreaming itself out from its source, all the way out to the 5 elements of matter in a physical universe, and that the physical universe is not the end-all and be-all of everything to those beings who are called lovers of divine reality, or devotees of the Divine Mother of the universe, or seekers of truth, those beings, of which there are quite a few, then we're going to have a way to account for all of these movements of the mind, all the way back to its source when mind disappears in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or in Nirvana. So with that as a preamble to this, you see this beautiful image here of the goddess and the cosmic egg, as it were. There's ancient teachings in India. Hiranyagarbha is one of them. Hiranyagarbha means, I think it's listed here even, isn't it? The cosmic egg out of which everything has come. And you can also call that the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. You could call it the word Om. All of those things are fairly synonymous with one another, although they do get their own treatments, each of them, very deep treatments that prove their validity to the seeker or the philosopher who wants to know. So you see there that everything is the all-pervasive Brahman. You see that this is from the story of Ikshvaku in Yoga Vashishta scripture. That's a scripture I can highly recommend to everyone, because it's based basically in stories. But these stories are nothing like you've ever heard before, like you've been raised on, like Aesop's fairy tables or Grimm's fairy tales, which are pretty grim. This is not grim, this is graceful. And Lord Vashishta is telling you stories of origins of human beings and the meanings of their existence from all sorts of different standpoints. And a lot of it has to do with Maya, how Maya gets into the mind. So when that happens, and the worlds effloresce inside of this spaceless space as kind of a dream emanation, a mass collective mental dream of souls, then what gets left out of the quotient, and we saw that's true in science particularly, is the witness of phenomena, the witness of the dream, the dreamer itself, himself, herself, itself. And so we want to bring that element back in and account for it. There is a witness looking on, and Of course, that supreme witness would be Brahman. So we call Brahman all-pervasive, because everything is taking place in it, just like a child is being born in the womb of a mother. And this is probably another significance for the egg. You see, the ovum and so forth is, no matter what level you look at, it's this realm of full potential. But in the Indian way of thinking, it's a mental projection, and that which comes out of it is a projection. It's not reality. It's the one looking on that's the reality. And that's, again, we call that Sakshi Bhutam, or the eternal witness of all phenomena. My teacher, Swami Aseshanandaji, used to start off a lot of his lectures saying, Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dandvaititam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvama Shadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamatchalam Sarvati Sakshi Bhutam. That's witness of phenomena. Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. We salute the original teacher, the leader of our souls, to whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, and who is the witness of all phenomena. Sakshi Bhutam. Bhutas means worlds, Bhutas means bodies, Bhuta means departed spirits. It's got a lot of significance to that word in Sanskrit. But Sakshi is the real important thing, is that there's a witness of all that, and all of that is called, bluntly, phenomena. Like waves rising on the ocean. It's the ocean that's real, the waves only have a passing significance, a few seconds play. And so that's also how they describe your life in relativity. Your life in the river of time is coming to an end, is one line out of a song I know, translated by our founder, Lex Hickson. So with that, again, as a preamble, we see here, all-pervasive Brahman pervades it all, from top to bottom. All is Brahman would be the final conclusion. And from the very top, even before the cosmic egg is utilized for manifestation in a kind of dream projection way, all of this is being done, and it's all being supplied by eternal jnana, wisdom rays. I like that about Lord Vashishta. He's always talking about rays of wisdom infusing everything. And let's put it this way, we know about the Vedanta and Buddhism and so forth, how they call everything empty, and so you're supposed to become detached from it, right? But there's another way of looking at it, that yes, you should become detached from the object itself as a source for pleasure, as a cause for suffering, however you want to put that in terms of objects. But if you were to get beyond those two problems, attachment and aversion, you would all of a sudden find that this is a manifestation of your own wisdom. All these objects came out of your mind, is another way of saying that, or objects are just mind made manifest, as Sri Sharda Devi put it, or wisdom concretized. So this is what we mean by wisdom rays coming from Brahman, infusing all of the cosmic egg, impregnating it with sentiency. So everything that shines here, all this light, is from Brahman's light. You know the beautiful chant about that, about the light of the sun, the light of the moon, the light of stars, the light of lightning. All of that shines by Brahman's light. See? And by its light, all of this is made radiant. So we chant that at our pujas and one of our wisdom chants, one of our light consciousness chants. So that's what we mean by everything getting pervaded by this light. And since Brahman doesn't move, then here's what moves. We also call this Shakti. It's Divine Mother Wisdom. And she's the one that moves, or appears to move, to come to our aid, to give us intelligence, to help us solve our problems, to help us solve our philosophical quandaries, and to turn us into Jivan Muktas. And there are some beautiful quotes about that, about Holy Mother, coming up in one of these charts that I'll share with you, because Swami Aseshananda saw her, Sri Sharda Devi, got initiated by her, touched her feet, saw her face, and so forth, and longed for her grace, and made him an Advaita Vedantist and a worshipper of Shakti the rest of his life. He fused those two great paths, Advaita and Shakti, so we call that Shakta Advaita Vada. You might say is a good name for the path of people who like both non-duality and Divine Mother wisdom. So that's a known path in India, Shakta Advaita Vada. So I wanted to explain those two things first. There's the all-pervasive Brahman, Atmic reality, and it's always, these rays are always permeating and injecting themselves into this cosmic egg. And that's how it's done, by Shakti. Here you see Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Drovya Shakti. And there are teachings in Tantra particularly that pertain to that. Icha Shakti means the Divine Mother's supreme will. This is her will that certain things come about. It's her will that this egg be formed, this cosmic egg, and she does it through the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. She'll have them do the projecting, the sustaining, and the withdrawing, but she'll give them the impetus to enter into that. And so these are one of the four main Shaktis that you see. There's these big bubbles, and there's these little bubbles here. It says potent Shaktis and many other minor Shaktis interpenetrating, see, or commingling. So Icha Shakti would be first, Jnana Shakti would be the second. Hard to put them in any kind of order, but Jnana Shakti, of course, is the power of intelligence. Supreme intelligence in this case, like the intelligence that Lord Buddha named himself after. You can call me anything, or you can call me nothing, he said at the end of his life, but the only thing you can really call me is awakened. So Buddhi means awakened intelligence. So this Jnana Shakti is that, making sure that beings have access to awakened intelligence, which is their innate nature, right? We looked at that in Vedanta's way of thinking back in this chart, is that when you look at science's way of thinking of intelligence and theology's way of looking at intelligence, how it gets formed and where it's limited to and so forth. But when you look at Vedanta's view of intelligence, its declaration about it, we see that this is the innate thing itself. Vivekananda put that nicely. He said, Brahman is original and all-pervasive. Jnana, Shakti, that is intelligence, is the first thing out the gate. When any kind of movement is going to happen, it'll proceed by wisdom. And so she's there on the scene. Jnana Shakti would be extremely important then, and along with her will, it's an incomparable match, you see. Irrefutable, incomparable, and irrepressible match. Then add with that Kriya Shakti, her dynamic power. That is, she acts for the good, highest good of all beings in the cosmic egg. It's her intention that they all be fulfilled and satisfied, and that they never run afoul of the process of projection. That would be called samsara, or maya. How the reason so many people fall into ignorance and forgetfulness is not her doing, it's not her intent. There's some kind of half-baked idea out there that Divine Mother is the one that deludes you and so forth. And that's said only from the standpoint of her overseership and her patience with you as an individual soul. She knows that individual souls are not real. Yet there they are taking egos. If the soul takes an ego, then it says, I want to live a separate life from you, Mother. It's just like you being born to your mother and growing up and going away later. Bye, Mom. So there's this movement away from the source. And this is done by ahamkara. Body-mind mechanism is formed via ego, ideation, and you know the ego's business is. In fact, Lord Vashishta puts it very nicely. He says, it's a separate eye maker. I always think of cookie cutters and dough when I hear that. Like each person is, each thumbprint's different, each person is different, but their features are stamped on them from their inner features. We're, again, back to science. We've got genes, we've got heredity, and we've got DNA and all of this. This is the outer form of an inner tendency called a samskara. And so all of these things that we're so taken up with in science and various fluid essences, Father of Yoga used to call them rasas and so forth, are really the product and manifestation of something that's of the mind, inner thought, samskaras. The way you are is stamped on your features. So if you look at yourself and you begin to see that where you came from, you can even look at your face in the mirror. You begin to see deeper into who you are. Swami Paramahamsa used to be able to look at the people who came to him and see who they were by their features. Where they came from means their inner life, and how they came to be the way they were, ignorant, knowledgeable, intelligent, or an admixture of all three. And also then could see how to get them free if they would listen. Jivanmukta kind of realization. The fourth Shakti, well, Kriya Shakti is very important then, and then you have Dravya Shakti. Dravya Shakti is, the best definition I've heard of it in English, is the producer of substances. So just like our divinity is stamped on our very features, or lack thereof, because Sri Ramakrishna used to say some people are very dull looking. They have no light. Their eyes don't shine. They don't have any inner intelligence. They're just like animals fixed to the ground. In fact, maybe they're even not quite as aware as animals in some ways. Whatever the case may be, no put down on the animals intended, the animal kingdom. They don't have any light of intelligence shining in their eyes, and their features are dull. So that has to be added in there. But at the same time, just like that happens to the human being, so is there a producer of substances in the realm of nature and worlds. Is that she will make sure the five elements get their time to shine in the sun. You see, she'll make sure that there are dream elements, and then the dream elements will connect to the subtle senses, and the subtle senses will connect to the gross senses, and the gross senses will connect to the gross elements. Those are 20, by the way. 5, 5, 5, 5. 10 of them inside, 10 of them outside. You'll know that if you look back on the second class last week, and the class before that, we looked at the three bodies, didn't we? The elements of the involution process that Lord Copula gave us. You can look back on that. So you'll find there these sets of fives, and that's how Dravya Shakti is working in us, to make sure that everything is provided in this cosmic egg. Now, as these eternal Jnana rays, Jnana means wisdom, he used the word here, Atmagyan. Nirvana means Atmagyan, knowledge of your true self. So when that shines into this periphery, the inner contents, you might say, of this cosmic egg, then you'll see all universes, the five elements, and all objects are formulated. And here's where Lord Vashishta shows his true concern for human beings. As if it weren't enough just to explain the cosmic process like that, Shustrahasya, how everything gets projected, and how it all comes out of Brahman, Brahman being an uncaused cause, and the real cause being Shakti on down. As if that weren't enough to say, now he wants to say, well, the reason I'm telling you about this process of origins, because this is where we're going to get much deeper than theology, you see. So we want to talk to you about origins, then why are we bringing this up? Because Brahman is all there is. Why can't we just tell you about Brahman and let's forget about the cosmic egg? Because the cosmic egg is where everything starts getting dicey. So, that being the case, why is Lord Vashishta bringing this up? Well, here's why. Because out of universes, elements, and objects, you have these two paths. And so nirvana and samsara begins to get defined in a better way here. If these eternal rays that form the universe's space of time in human beings get associated with chinmatra, then it removes your ignorance. That is, along with the eternal wisdom rays is coming this along with these eternal wisdom rays are coming this tendency towards ignorance, because where there's knowledge, there's also ignorance. So some beings are more susceptible to it, and other beings are rather easy for them to avoid it. Like a Jivan Mukta would easily avoid that kind of ignorance and just think noble thoughts, and the natural intelligence he would just involve back to the source of that intelligence, and that would be his natural process of returning to his source. But people who get stuck out in samsara, as nirvana, they associate the ego and sankalpa. They associate those worlds and objects and universes with sankalpa, mental projection, done by the ego, and therefore create the illusion of bondage in themselves. Notice how careful they are to say they just didn't create bondage because ignorance is unreal. Bondage is unreal. Resist not evil. So you don't give it a name and a form and a place in reality. It never had a place. It's an insinuation, and it's done by a mind that has forgotten its true nature. A mind that had possession of its true nature all the time would never fall into that kind of misunderstanding or misfiance. And all the sufferings and karmas and problems that we see in the world that come out of that kind of mindset, even out of wise systems like science and theology, creates a loss of war and violence. Science gets an atom, splits it, leads to power for violence. Religion goes to war with other religions. See, that would not happen in a soul that had chinmatra. Chinmatra actually means particle of consciousness, if you want to break it down. Chinmay is consciousness, highest consciousness, and matra is a particle. It also means mother, matri. So these kinds of teachings, we see them mentioned by ancient souls like Lord Vashishta, who was way back in the time of Sri Ram. He was actually schooling Sri Ram when Sri Ram was a teenager. That's how ancient Lord Vashishta is. So we find words like chinmatra way back then. So we see that they're thinking about terms of not just atomic particles, but they're thinking in terms of these jnana particles, these wisdom rays, these chinmay, these rays of intelligence. And let's just put it this way: if they come and they hit a certain mind that's projecting out of ego and sankalpa, that intelligence gets dulled down, it gets dimmed down, it gets dumbed down. And then that's the secret of dumb, you see. So if it hits a mind that is resilient and full remembrance of its true nature, or at least is on the path towards enlightenment, using the Dharma and teachings, for instance, these higher thoughts, then it will associate with those particles of intelligence, and it will penetrate through and destroy sankalpa. So here's the destruction of sankalpa. Notice how the double bar here will not let these souls pass through to destroy their samskaras. They will get caught in samskaras, and therefore in samsara. These words sound alike, they also have a connection. Samskaras are mental impressions that you've formed over lifetimes by acts you've done that were not well considered or were mixed. And so this is, if you want to speak in terms of Kundalini Shakti, this is called a granthi, a big knot in consciousness that souls can't pass through. There are three of them, one at the lowest chakra, one before the heart chakra, and one before the third eye chakra. And beings are trying to penetrate those and getting thrown back to lower levels of awareness because of their mental tendencies. Now, Jivan Mukta, of course, has transcended all of those, and so is penetrating through with these with these particles of intelligence. Don't you see them? They're words. They're in his words. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the goddess is called Vakdevi, goddess of the Word. So in each of these there are words. In each of those words there are letters, and in each of those letters there are meanings. And this is how Tantra proceeds to find its way to Brahmagyan, or Atmagyan, is through words. Words are of extreme importance, not just for their meaning, so that you can communicate with someone, because they actually hold the wisdom mother in them, in the form of tiny, tiny little intelligent particles. Her. She's sitting in every particle. She's in every atom. She's in every molecule. She's in every... And then take her beyond the physical, and she's in every pranic particle that flows through your movement. She's in every thought that flows in your mind. She's the intelligent rays that created the whole cosmic egg out of which all the worlds were formed. That's Mother. Mother intelligence, Mother wisdom. You trace her back to her four main... They trace her back to her four main manifestations. And there are a bunch of other little Shaktis, too, that are commingling with her. So this whole thing is about living in Brahman, and if you do get involved in the process of the cosmic, cosmology, of the whole cosmic process, then you're going to have to be careful of your own sankalpa. Ignorance is unreal. Then how can it cause any real doubt? So then what does the Jivan Mukta do with his mind and its projections? He dissolves them all back at the end of the day, like bubbles into water. So he's constantly dissolving the unreal, that is the product of what's coming up from living in the cosmic egg, back into his source, to the mother. He's doing that every day, probably doing it with every breath. And it becomes effortless in the case of a Jivan Mukta. That's why I said I never saw him change when I was with him. He was just always in this state of consciousness. And pretty soon you just have to, when you're around a person like that, you just say, I think I like that, and I think I want to be like that. And then you'll know when you know what the word guru, you'll reach your higher state of consciousness, isn't it? The word guru, you see. My brother used to joke and say, gee, you are you. That's the real meaning of the guru, is he's showing you who you really are. But in a philosophical sense, there are particles of understanding in each word. That's why you react to them. And if you have a name, and you identify with your name, and people call your name, and you look at them, then that's the ego's. The ego's got I'm this such and such. See, this is my name, it's great, and this is my knowledge, and so forth. The ego's got a hold of all of this, but the ego's gone in a person like this. Gone, utterly gone, and so did his ignorance go with it, because it was involved in the sankalpic process. And it's what got itself bound inside the cosmic egg, so it couldn't get out of the realm of its ancestors anymore. It got caught in those knots, those grunties, and bouncing back and forth like a ping pong ball between the third and first chakra, you see. That is eating, drinking, and sex life, ancestors, heaven, back to earth, back to heaven, back to earth. Lower heaven, that is, because there's a higher heaven called the heart. And then there's a place of her, you see, where she resides in the throat, Sri Ramakrishna said. And these are all internal secrets. They cannot be understood by people who focus only on the external, outer. The world will never understand love and God, those words, or Guru, because they don't have the wherewithal to reach them. They're caught in this sankalpic process and they can't get out. Well, there's samsara for you, and that's why I wanted to show you this chart. Basically, we can go on from there. But after destruction of sankalpa, chitta becomes focused on the Atman again. See, it got back through the shell of the cosmic egg. where universes and space and time, too many to shake a stick at, as my granny used to say, you see, got transcended, and it began to concentrate on its Atman again. Let's bring in us as seekers. In this lifetime, we're all seekers, right? So we heard about the Atman, and he says, some have heard of the Atman, some have never heard of it. Over here he says, a few have tried to practice Advaita, others have listened, you see. So it's like some have heard of milk, some have never heard of milk, and some have never tasted it, and some have tasted it. It's the same way with the Atman. So when you hear about the Atman, then your chitta, your thoughts, become focused on the Atman, but you would have had to have destroyed your tendency to live. Great little studies of lives in the realm of samsara. You would have had to have gotten tired of that, world-weary, fed up with it, or desired freedom so much and got exhilarated by the words of some great soul that you would want to turn your thoughts, chitta, away from the world, renounce in these three ways, and get to the source called your Atman. Once the chitta, the thoughts, are concentrated on the Atman again, then attainment of abhava, non-existence. So now anymore I don't either exist or nor do I not exist. I wear non-existence as a sword. I hold it as a sword. And anything that comes at me that's unreal, it doesn't exist, right? So I cut non-existence away. So non-existence is a weapon for the Jivan Mukta. Non-existence is a trap for the nihilist. So for the Buddhist and the Advaitist, non-existence is the second highest stage you could possibly reach. Well, that would be according to the Tantricists. But some believe that there's a higher state called Mahayoga. Abhava is very, very high. Yes, we'll give that to you. That means nothing exists and I can cut everything away that's not me. You see, that's not the true me, including the ego, which is the false me. But they say you will come to a state when everything exists. All is Brahman, right? All is Brahman. So here it is. You attain abhava, non-existence, and you realize all is Brahman. It's like Mahayoga. It's the greatest yoga you could possibly attain in the realm of attainments. It's probably beyond attainment. So that's what Vasishtha says here at the end of this teaching he gave to Sri Ram, the young teenage avatar, way, way back in the earliest yugas, you see. He says, after calming sankalpa, mental projection, contemplate all things with the eye of abhava and wear it like a sword. That's why I can prescribe the scripture, Lord Yoga Vasishtha, to everyone to study. These great teachings are in it, and all couched in these very beautiful stories. And I went so far as to make my own transliteration of it and translation here at SRV, so you can get a copy from us. There are probably others in existence too that you can read. So, stainless cause of the universe, we look at that. Now let's go on in the time remaining, because we have digested a third of these, number 6. I think we've taken 10, 6, and 4 now. But let's look at this one, which is number 1. The very first one I didn't know I was going to do the other 9 when I did this one about a year ago. But then the idea came to me, hey, you can just keep doing this, because look at all the things Swami Aseshanandaji said, and you have them all on tape. Because I was allowed at the Vedanta Society to put my microphone up there and tape him on what was then one of the newest technologies called digital audio tape. So I had this little digital audio tape player, no hiss, perfect sound, the newest thing in technology at the time. And so I just asked him if I could record him, and he said, oh, okay. So I put my mic up there and recorded him. So SRV became the owner of many, many of Swami Aseshanandaji's lectures through the 80s. That was probably in the 80s that happened, that I had that technology, and even took it to India and recorded some of these songs, which I haven't sung any for you, I'm afraid, today, but taken up in the Word here. And here's more words by him, which are all very powerful. And let me find my way back here to Advaita Vedanta in the Jivan Mukta and get this chart up. And there you have his first quote. You have hypnotized yourself into thinking that you are a Hindu, a Christian, a Jew, or an agnostic. All these are called upadhis. Upadhis are superimpositions by the mind over consciousness. You are to negate them and realize the truth by asking the question, who am I? Ramana Maharshi followed that method. First say, Naham. Anything that changes, I am not. Then say, Kaham. Who am I then? Then you affirm Saham. Saham means I am infinite. So a three-part version that he gave to the Atma Vichara. And by the way, Atma Vichara, Ramana Maharshi was the most recent bookend of that. Who was the other bookend at the earliest time? Right here. They both practiced Atma Vichara as the main method for proceeding. It's his Vedanta in its best light, and the non-dual version of it, I mean. It has many, many good steps to it, but the Advaita Vedanta is superlative. So a very beautiful saying to start out with. What I'd like to do, though, for the rest of the class here is, and I have to do it sideways here, if this thing doesn't shift on me too much, is read you this quote. This isn't going to work because if you've run one of these, you know that it's flipping all over. So let me read it to you this way. Oh, actually, it's in good condition here. Here's Swami Aseshanandaji, I heard him say this in one of his lectures. I have lived in this country since 1947, and it is my prayer that the American people begin spiritual disciplines in their individual lives, in their family lives, in their social lives, and in their national lives. Discipline. There can be no true freedom without discipline. So teach your children from the cradle to the grave to live a life of self-control and self-discipline. So 1947, he probably said this maybe about 87, so looking at us for 40 years, he finally threw up his hands, as it were, and said, you know what's missing here? Sadhana. You can come and listen to me talk all you want, week after week, he said, at his lectures, and he wanted you to. But until you took this and made it your own life's realization, then it wouldn't go very deep. See, so this is where some of these others come in. Let me gain this back here, because before I take a chart to teach off of that one saying, I want to give you another example of that. Like here he says, affirmation must be followed up by spiritual practices and disciplines in order to be effective. So this is affirmation. I am Brahman, right? Who am I? Or I am that. That's not enough. And I visited some Western speakers on Advaita Vedanta in my early days, and I was totally unimpressed with them. Because they just kept saying, you should ask who am I, you should ask who am I, you should ask who am I, and they didn't have any teaching behind it whatsoever. And so I left. I just stood up and left. When I found him, I found out, you can't just affirm that Brahman exists. You have to go practice sadhana. And from sadhana, then you realize. And that's just the way it is. Here he says, you will not solve problems of mankind through acceptance of evolution, but only through acceptance of involution. Evolution always presupposes change, but reality must be changeless. Then, here's a good one. The power of doing will not help the individual unless the power of being is behind it. So he's covering all bases here. You can't escape ignorance by action. You can't annihilate karma by more karma. Action and action, that's a volatile vat of acid you're putting yourself in. You don't know what inaction is, for one thing. And maybe some of us haven't even, if we look at politics and business and so forth, some of us haven't even realized yet that there's a difference between right action and wrong action. So the lines of demarcation, let's talk about that in a different way. They're really blurring the lines between what's true and what's not true, and what's real and what's unreal. And between what's real and unreal and what's mixed. If you know what's mixed, and that's the most volatile of all, that admixture, and that's going to be the most confusing. You have to withdraw that. So that's the teaching of akarma, vikarma, and karma in the Gita. Krishna gives it out again at early times. And so he says very nicely there, power of doing will not help you without the power of being behind it. Now let's go back to the science chart, or let's not, but you can remember that basically doing, physics, matter, that's all you're involved in science, right? And in Western psychology, actually they bring a little bit of the mind into it, but it's all focused on the earth. It's not focused on bardos of a past lifetime. It's not taken into consideration in Jungian or Freudian philosophy, in psychology. So if you're looking back at that teaching, and then you find out that there is a power of being, and not just a power of doing, then you're talking about consciousness. There's a consciousness behind action. There's a consciousness behind thinking. And in fact, a thought is father to the deed. So here's a chance for you, an opportunity for you to move back in to your true nature, towards your true nature. This, like what he said here, right? Body is a symbol of consciousness. Mind is a symbol of, body is a symbol of existence. Your mind is a symbol of consciousness, but your Atman is a symbol of pure awareness. So there's a three-step process you can move back in towards. But not if the power of doing is your only modus operandi. If that's your only way of proceeding, action only, then it's karma and reaction, action and reaction for you. You'd think science would know that what you think you are, and action and reaction go together. So if you took that out of the realm of physics and put it in the realm of metaphysics, then you have the mind, psychology, and how it thinks, and then it gets into problems. How it thinks, maybe I can split that atom and dominate over the world. Oops, I caused suffering. Oops, I have karma. Here I am back again in another lifetime having to pay for it. And never getting out of sankalpa, and never seeing beyond the cosmic egg. My goodness, this is an ideation that is alien to most people. This is the kingdom of heaven within here that they don't know about. Not even the Christians know about it very well. It's just one world, and that one world is a little tiny atom somewhere at the bottom of this egg. So he wants you to wake up. Well, we can wake up to your Atman, but that's a big leap for most people. You could wake up to cosmology, and that would be a rather large leap too. But you might wake up to the fact that you're the doer, that you're the dreamer, and that if you realize that, then you may be a future Jivan Mukta. Or you may be, as Vivekananda said, angels unaware. You are all angels unaware. You heard the Christians talking about angels and higher beings. He just looked at them and said, why are you thinking about angels? You yourself are angels unaware. So you realize your true nature, is what they're trying to say. So these little nuggets get really potent, and you put them together, they are grounds for inspiration and more. Your real self, I can hear him saying this as clear as day right now. Your real self is infinite, not finite. Your real self is immortal, not mortal. Your real self is divine, not sinful. Your real self is birthless as well as deathless. Now here he is coming at you, with the truth. If he can't get to you through all these other avenues, then he's just going to come out and tell you. Because you're laboring under the fact that someone called you a sinner and you believe it. You're laboring the fact that you're a body that evolved in Earth by the science's evolution theory, and you believed it. And, somebody told you were stardust in a hippie song, and you believed it. See? But no, you're not finite. You're infinite. Your true nature is infinite. So he says, do not just idealize the real, realize the ideal. He was no slouch at a turn of philosophical phrase. This must have come to him, and he was thinking, oh, I know how I can put it to him next lecture, because he gave lectures week after week for 40 years, every Sunday to us. To everyone who would come and listen. He usually had 20, 30 people in his congregation there on Sunday, sometimes more, and 50 to 100 when he gave a puja, on Durga Puja and so forth. So he finally would figure out ways of saying things after repeating himself so many times. So he said, one day he said, don't just idealize the real, realize the ideal. So people are idealizing the real by turning God into so many different things that God isn't. Making them into angels, for instance. God's not an angel. Making them into their baby. God's not your baby. God is not a form. So how could it be an angel or a baby? What you're seeing is some wisdom rays that got into the cosmic egg and then got into your egg. And in your egg was a fetus, a potential fetus, a future fetus that had all these things imprinted on its subconscious mind already, called samskaras, and the ability to be reborn again in ignorance was also one of them. Which seeds are you going to water? And as a parent, when your child comes out and begins to grow, which tendencies are you going to support and which tendencies are you going to negate? Help that soul, because Christ said that's not your child there, that's a soul that's been given to your care. And by being sentimental and saying this is my child, it's the ego getting a hold of it, just like ego got a hold of knowledge. So you've done philosophy and religion a great disservice, and you're not listening. Not listening to a great soul like that when he comes. He says here, I do not believe in salvation in a post-mortem emancipation. I believe in Jivan Mukti, eternal liberation, liberation even here in this very body. So I think that was his particular coining of phrase, a post-mortem emancipation. I've never heard anyone else use that before or since. I don't believe in a post-mortem emancipation. He had to think about what the Christians were trying to pawn off on him as a liberated soul, and he'd have to come back to them and say, I'm sorry, I don't want to go to heaven. We know what heaven is inside of the cosmic egg, and it's not very high to us. I believe in Jivan Mukta, because Jivan Mukta is a living, liberated condition that transcends time. Why would I want to come back in time or go visit my ancestors in heaven where there's just more pleasure and less pain? I'm beyond pleasure and pain. My true nature is beyond pleasure and pain. And I'll know that if I practice the power of being and maybe let myself out the back door a little bit with this power of doing all the time. There's another quote here that would be very good, but it's not here with me right now, but it has to do with, here in America you come up to each other and you say, how do you do? The ego immediately says, I do everything. But the Jivan Mukta says, I do nothing. So if you come up to a Jivan Mukta and say, how do you do? Nothing. You're going to get an answer like that. He's living in a bhava. Nothing exists for him except the self. Sorry, Buddhists, if you don't like that word. We're talking about the eternal, all-pervasive, indivisible, transcendent self. We call it Atman. You call it Buddha nature. Well, Buddhism. Buddhism stresses self-effort. Christianity places an accent on grace. See, here's his observance of people that came to him who were both Buddhists and Christians. But Sri Ramakrishna was always harmonizing, saying grace and self-effort must go hand in hand. So my talk last Sunday at New Thought Church in Kona nearby here was about the two wings of the bird. I got that from him. Self-effort and grace must go hand in hand. So it's not enough just to depend on grace, because then you'll depend on a Savior, and you might have to wait 2,000 years for him to come and save you, and you'll be believing in a post-mortem emancipation, yada, on and on. And it's not enough to just to take self-effort alone. I had somebody say something to me yesterday, said, oh, Babaji, you've been carrying me long enough, I have to do it up by myself now. I said, what? Nobody can do this by themselves. You think the razor's edge path can be done by the ego? It never has accomplished it. It's always had to take refuge in God and God's grace. Even the realized souls take refuge in God's grace. They don't discount grace just because they realize that their Advaitic nature. Every one of them will say that God's grace descended upon them. They might say Mother's grace in my tradition, but nonetheless, because God doesn't cast grace upon you, God is an all-pervasive, transcendent verity. He doesn't look upon people and say, here, I'll give you grace, and here, I'll send you to hell. It's ridiculous. So let's look at an intermediary, the Trinity, the Mother of wisdom, see, the Guru. Get some grace from them, and then mingle it with your self-effort, and you'll get free. Without renunciation, you can never find true happiness. Without renunciation, you cannot find true joy. Without renunciation, you cannot attain Jivan Mukti, freedom in this life, in this very body. And renunciation is gained through Jnana Yoga, Jnana rays. You get renunciation by informing yourself of the Dharma. Then meditation and devotion will help, you see. But without that jnana, meditation and devotion will not do much for you, because your ignorance is still there. When you meditate, your ignorance is still there. When you love God and jump up and down and sing His name, your ignorance is still there. So when you come out of meditation, you come out of kirtan, you're still ignorant. You go on doing the same old things, suffering the same old karmas, and you come back with your ancestors in another lifetime. But Jnana will not allow that. Atmagyan will destroy all ignorance in you. Then meditate. Then engage in action. Then do your devotions at the altar and sing His name. And then see what happens. Where will your ignorance be then, he said. Where will your fear be? Where will your so-called assumed bondage be? So we took a lot of these in a row in an inspired way. Let's go back and look at one more chart in the remaining 10 minutes. I have lived in this country since 47, and my prayer is that the American people begin spiritual disciplines. Like, say what? Well, let's look at the Walker of the Sky, since we're sort of have a beautiful relationship going with Lord Vashishta right now. The Walker of the Skies is one of Lord Vashishta's stories, and it's about Queen Chudala, who was a meditator, and she was married to King Shikidwaja. Chudala and Shikidwaja were a divine couple, but Queen Chudala was far more advanced spiritually than he was, and he didn't know it. So you feminists will like this, you see. So basically, the Divine Mother really got into her, and she got very advanced, and she sat and meditated with King Shikidwaja every day, but she was having transcendental experiences, he wasn't. And when he saw the change take place in her over the months, he asked her, well, what about this? Why are you changing so much in your meditation and so forth? He says, well, she says, gingerly as she could put it, he said, well, I've get to have transcendental experiences in my meditation. And he laughed at her and said, no, you're a woman, you can't have those. So that kind of thing was there back in early times too. So she just smiled, and went on serving and everything. So with that as a story, maybe you're intrigued to go and get a copy of Lord Vashishta and see how it worked out for them. But basically, inside of that story, she had to tell about this method of walking the skies. Walking the skies means inner skies. So if we look back on this color chart I just showed you, This would be going back into the kingdom of heaven within, or my Father's mansion has many chambers. These are the ways, cryptic sayings from Jesus, that we can understand this a bit in the West today. Or going back into this cosmic egg, back into the worlds within. Not all the way to the Atman yet, because there are no worlds in the Atman and in Brahman. The worlds all disappear, and there's just nothing but formless bliss, indescribable. But through this series of inner vibrations, these vibrations of words. Heaven is a word. Heaven, we used to say this, if you say Sri Ramakrishna, what do you get? Let's see, Sri Ramakrishna, you get Mother Kali right away. You get Swami Vivekananda. You get Holy Mother Shisharda Devi. You get the 16 direct disciples. You get Calcutta and the Dakaneshwar temple. Shall I go on? You get all the mantras and the gods and the goddesses and the songs and his sadhana in different religions. You get universality. So what's in a word, they ask me. I laugh, you see. My mantra happens to have his name in it, Ramakrishna, and I've been meditating on it for 45 years or more. So what's in a word? I can tell you what's in a word if you give me even 3 hours. Or 12. Or 15. Over this 5-class series. But unfortunately I only have about 10 minutes left, so I will go through the Walker of the Skies in that time. Because he says, I wish they would practice a spiritual discipline, I'll give you just one of dozens of methods that India prescribes. There's yoga, and there's tantra, and there's puja, and there's arati, and there's just so many things you can do, mantra. But here's what Queen Chudala prescribes. She says, first, how do you qualify yourself for higher powers? Proper diet. So we know first pure foods. Foods that are removed by mantra. The impurities are in them. Not just organic, non-organic, but impurities that are in there because people grew them for money or didn't get the right organic balance. There's so many different defects in food that are not just physical again, but energetical and mental. Somebody, grew your food, prepared it with a violent state of mind, so it gets into the food, makes it impure. So you must have proper diet, pure food. Put that with easy posture. Easy posture means you've got to learn this asana. You don't need 50 different asanas and shifting your body around. You just need 1 or 5. There are 5 main asanas that the Tantra yogas prescribe you to practice. One of them you select, and that's the one you're going to sit in. That pretty much puts Hatha Yoga in its right place. Third limb of yoga. Then you control the prana. Breath is one way to do that, but breath has to be connected to what makes your eyes see, what makes your nose smell, what makes your tongue taste, what makes your arm move, what makes your mouth speak. That's all prana. So you connect it back further, finally to the psychic prana in your mind. That's coming. Then detach from sense objects. In other words, what he's saying is that you cannot, or what she's saying is you cannot detach from sense objects until you can control the prana. You can't get concentration until you get pratyahara. It's the 8-limbed yoga. It's another method like this one. So it's like I was just saying, you can't really get rid of your ignorance through meditation or devotion. You have to use Atmagyan, then meditate and increase your devotion. In the same way here, you want to do the same kind of process. Make sure you control the prana and then try and detach your senses from the objects. Then purify the body-mind mechanism. Rise above the 6 passions. What are they? Kama, krodha, so forth. That is lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, pride, delusion, so forth. 6 passions. Rise above them. Keep them at a minimum, Sri Ramakrishna used to say. You can't get rid of them completely, keep them at a minimum. And you'll have a chance for spiritual life that way, that's uninterrupted. Then secure a path of preceptor and scriptural knowledge. And if there's any indication that I did that, it's probably these 10 charts I'm going to be showing you. I got a mantra from him, I got a path outline for him, and I certainly got him, the scriptural knowledge from him as my preceptor. Then worship and awaken Kundalini Shakti, like Gary Dickens was doing when he painted this. See, he was having darshans of different deities, and he put them in paintings. This is how he envisioned it. You see, this is the worlds within. These deities. They're there in Hindu pantheon. They're there in Tibetan Buddhism. They're there in angelic Christianity. You call Vajravahini in Tibetan Buddhism. She's the same that we're talking about here in Kundalini Yoga. You have to have darshan with Vajravahini if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, and then the game is over. You see, you've got this mother deity on your side. So you want to get this divine being, realize her inside of you. Then Kundalini awakens through Jnanam. Same as he's saying here. I could go on and on about that again, but we'll just go on here. Then Kundalini Shakti flows upwards. Upwards means inwards. Up the spine is what they mean, but not the physical spine. It's vortexes that are aligned with the physical spine in another dimension. And so you have to think about them as in a akasha, their own space. It's hard to find words for this in English. It's in another akasha where these vortexes are. You can visit them while dreaming. Sometimes you do, but you don't know you've been there. Then body and mind gain great strength. One of Vivekananda's favorite teachings. You must have great strength of mind and body. Bold and fearless, he said. Then Kundalini infuses the Puryastika body. Puryastika body is one of the oldest teachings, even before Sri Krishna, back to Lord Vashishta in Ram's time. Puryastika body means eightfold body. It's the 5 elements, and mind and intellect and thought. Puryastika body is eightfold body. This is my eightfold body, he says. That's my outer nature. But my inner nature is beyond that, and my transcendent nature is even beyond that. So, Mother will take over that eightfold body, like she did with Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Then the nadis become inflated. Yes, if you're going a different direction, the ego gets inflated. But if you're going inward to Kundalini Shakti, she'll deflate the ego and inflate the nadis, you see. So these subtle nerves inside of you, be like good circulation out here. There's also a nervous system inside of you, called a network of nerves called nadis. The yogis know about them. And when Kundalini Shakti invests herself in them and flows through them, that's illumination. That's light leaping through the nerves. I'm quoting a Sri Aurobindo poem called Savitri. Light, light, leaping through the nerves. That's Kundalini Shakti awakening in the nadis. Kundalini reaches the heart. So, and she's taking the soul on an inner ride, back to its source, if you will. And now the ego is smiling. So the severed head is smiling, you see. It's fully invested in her, as she's invested in the nadis. Then eternal life is realized. Jivan Mukta would happen at that place. At that place, you'd get a Swami Aseshanandaji. And then Kundalini reaches the Sushumna. And actually should reach the Sushumna to the Saraswati, to the Sahasrara, 1,000 petal lotus. She reaches through the whole system. That is, the Sushumna is this central channel. It's going up. So she reaches that and reaches to its highest point. That's where she walks the skies. That's where Queen Chudala goes inside in her meditation while King Shikidwaja is sitting there just thinking about things and not being able to go very deep in his meditation. But she's there, not even in her body. And she's inside in a transcendent state, and she's walking the skies. What happens then? You behold other walkers of the skies, she says. and you gain blessings through communing with them. So this is called darshana with the deities. Not just the deities, with other luminaries, because the deities, some of them aren't so high. They're all inside of you, by the way, and you are containing them. So, but it's not the case with other great luminaries that you would meet. You know what he said once? He said, these great beings are birthless and deathless. That's how I reached Holy Mother. She's a deathless being. So he actually said that to us. I reached Holy Mother in my lifetime. You see, so after she passed, he meditated on her and he recalled her. She came back to him. So that was his deity of his heart. That's his Ishvari. Now he says, I've worshipped her on the shrine for you for years, but now I want to show her to you in my heart. He said that once. I want to open up my heart and show you Holy Mother residing there, because he walked the skies with her. May we all be so fortunate. Om Sato, Om Sato Ma Sadgamaya, Tamaso Ma Joytir Gamaya, Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamaya, Abira Abira Mayeti, Rudrayate Dakshinamukam, Denamam Pahinicham, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.